My name is Nigel Gilbert. I'm honored to be moderating this discussion. I think that just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm a professor of computational social science at the University of Surrey in Guildford in England. Some of you may know me from work that I've done on agent-based modeling, but I do other things too. Welcome back to after lunch. I think we're going to need to make sure that this panel is an active and exciting occasion, otherwise you're all going to go to sleep after the large lunch. We'll do our best to avoid that. The panel has the title, Rethinking Knowledge in the Age of Complexity. Think back to what we were talking about this morning. Knowledge in its various shapes and its evolution was a central feature of all the talks that we heard this morning. So I think it's very appropriate that we should spend a little time in this panel rethinking the idea of knowledge in the age of complexity. We've got three distinguished and interesting panelists to hear from. I'm going to start by introducing Helena. Helena, do we have pictures? Yes, we have pictures. Right, so you can identify which one is Helena. She's a professor at the School of Philosophy and Cultural Studies at the National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow. She has a long string of associates and memberships, but for our purposes, I think what I'm really looking forward to is her knowledge of prominent system scientists, which she's translated into Russian. Her research interests include epistemology and the philosophy of science, with a particular emphasis on the philosophy of complexity and interdisciplinary research. And she's going to talk under the intriguing title of Dancing with Complexity, How the World Thinks Through Us. She's the first of our three panelists. I'm going to ask each of them in turn to speak for about 15 minutes. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions to the panel. So please, as you're listening, think of some challenging questions to ask of our panel. So over to you, Helen.
Hello, thank you for your introduction, Nigel. First, I will say a few words here and then from my place. Excuse me, I don't like this position because this position, to my mind, is too dominant, but I don't like any dominance. Also, the Russian power and the Russian state is still authoritarian and starts wars, which the people hate. First, I summarize my talk in a few words. So I want to elucidate three theses, 3 points. One is that the world is complex and our knowledge is also complex. I will talk about it. The second is the interconnection between the complexity of world and complexity of our knowledge. And the third one is more provocative. So what the reality itself can tells us about it. So what do we know? What knowledge produced by reality itself for us? And my position is fully participated, so I will talk from my place. And I have three sources, three traditions for me, which are of great importance. First, this is Philosophy of Instability by Ilya Prigozhin, also Russian origin, many times visited Russia. The second one is Edgar Morin and his Philosophy of Complexity, La pensée complexe, l'épistémologie complexe, and his view of the lost paradigm, le paradigme perdu, a new paradigm which can rely disciplines, rely people, rely subject and object of cognition. And the third one is the Russian tradition of applied mathematicians, starting from Kolmogorov, who gave a famous definition of what is randomness, what is accidentality in mathematical point of view. He was a grandfather of applied mathematicians in Keldysh Institute, led by Samarsky, academician Samarsky, and then academician Kurdyumov, Sergei Kurdyumov, my teacher. By the way, our speaker Peter is from Russia, and his father was collaborating with Kurdyumov as well. So we are like in this from the same origin, but different views, and these views about the cliodynamics, also development in the High School of Economics, where I teach at the moment. So first is the complexity of the world. The world we are living it is described by VUCA abbreviation. VUCA, it means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This is the keywords which capture the complexity of the world. And then non-linearity, openness of the systems, and the emergence between different levels of reality. For example, it's micro level, how we describe the behavior of elements, and the level of the dynamical level of the whole systems, emergent properties. So we have to understand this with some knowledge, but the knowledge itself is in the process of flow, in process of permanent changes. So and this is complexity of the very knowledge. We have to have our tools have to be complex enough to describe the complexity of this world. Also, it will be difficult to understand the complexity of the world. The second point is interaction and mutual dependence of subject and object of cognition. In the book, in the Edgar Morin book, La Méthode, the third volume, La connaissance de la connaissance, he said that the subject of cognition is in the very process of cognition. It's inbuilt in the cognition. To my view, we can describe this mutual dependence by the word co-evolution or co-emergence of subject and object of cognition, co-emergence of the complexity of the world and complexity of our knowledge. This is the most relevant word to describe this. And now I would like to give you some arguments why we can think on the control well. Not only we discover the laws of self-organization and evolution, but the world thinks through us. Or this metaphor, dancing with the world, dancing with the complexity of the world. Another German philosopher of complexity, Klaus Mainzer, who visited Russia for several times, his book is entitled Thinking in Complexity. Thinking in complexity, he said, it's like dancing in the rain. Dancing in the rain, it means we are in the rain. We want to describe the complexity of the world in the thing, being inside of the systems. This is a position. And here is some of my arguments. First, that reality can be understood through our concept, through other conceptions, through other models. There is no reality as such, but it is accessed through conceptual frameworks, models, and languages. And science of complexity does not mirror reality, but select it, amplify, organize it. We do not discover a fully given or pre-given world. No, we configure the world epistemologically, in an epistemological way. That's why the epistemology of complexity is of great importance. The second argument that observer is included in the very world, and there is the end of externality of a subject. Measurement affects systems. It was already so in quantum mechanics. Measurement affects systems. Description shapes dynamics, and observation is an action together with reality. The subject is not outside of reality, but co-present within the reality. The third argument is ontological openness. What is the world? We cannot say what is the world. The world as itself, as a matter of fact, it doesn't exist as a matter of fact. What we know about the reality, it's through our models, through our language, and through our conception. And the world is not fixed. Complex systems are not linear and far from equilibrium and evolving. And knowledge and action means select from the possible pathways and initiate after the point of bifurcation some path which is preferable according to our values. We can stabilize some trajectories or eliminate some paths which are not desirable for us. It means, in our view, in our view of the Russian School of Complexity Science, that we can choose in the state of instability the role of a subject, the role of actor, agent is very important. It can choose, the agent can choose the further path of evolution in the state of bifurcation of or in the state of instability, which can be also named as singularity. Singularity as the culmination point, which can turn the development, for example, from acceleration to slowing down, changing some regimes of evolution. One more argument that the argument of coevolution, knowledge and world transform together. The world we study tomorrow depends on our knowledge we develop today. So our views of the preferable future can influence that we can reach this future which is desirable for us. The fifth argument, which is not only from the science of complexity, but from other views, that the knowledge starts to be performative. Performative. It means if we discuss something, how to make the world more secure, so the very discussion can change the world, the processes in the world. The very discussion about the green future, green technology, can initiate technological changes in the world. It means performative. Economic models can shape markets. Ecological theory can shape our green policy and sustainable development. And so the very knowledge becomes to be performative. Two more arguments, or I have to finish. Headlines. Therefore, I start from the headlines for my points. So, okay, I have two more arguments, but maybe I can summarize. Dancing with complexity, what does it mean? The world unfolds our base of knowledge, while our knowledge is continuously reshapes the world's unfolding. It's neither subjective idealism and no naive realism, but this is participatory or relational ontology. I will conclude with the words of Edgar Morin. L'acte de connaître doit intégrer celui qui connaît. C'est dans leur travail, la méthode, la connaissance de la connaissance. Mutual connection of the object and subject of cognition. Thank you for your attention.
Very interesting ideas there. So I'm going to move swiftly on to welcome Carlos Gershenson, who some of you may already know, as he has lots of connections and relationships, including serving as the president of the Complex Systems Society, the editor-in-chief of Complexity Digest, and a member of the board of advisors of Scientific American, the popular science magazine. But as well as all of that, he is also the Empire Professor of Innovation at the School of Systems Science and Industrial Engineering at the State University of New York at Binghamton. His interests include artificial intelligence, complex systems, self-organization, artificial life, philosophy of science, with the applications to healthcare, transportation, governance, education, cybersecurity, and more. Carlos, you're going to talk to us about the implications of complexity. Have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Nigel. Thanks for the organizers. It's a pleasure being back here at UM6P. So I guess my presentation will show up soon. I wanted to speak about, and do I have a control over this? Yeah. So in conference of biology, people usually don't start discussing what biology is or what life is. So in a similar way, we meet to discuss complexity, but we assume that we mean the same thing when we speak about complexity. But I think it would be useful to discuss about different implications that complexity has. So of course, there are many different notions and many different definitions, many different measures. But etymologically, complexity comes from the Latin plexus, which means intertwined. So something complex is something that is difficult to separate. Why it's difficult to separate? Because it has interactions, and these interactions have many implications. From a materialist perspective, we usually focus on the elements of systems, but in complexity, the interactions tend to be even more relevant. This painting was inspired when I was living in Granada by the mosaics in Alhambra. So the idea is that members of a society are not independent, but they are shaped by the interactions they have with their neighbors. So actually, I'm a fan of Western Muslim tessellations or tilings patterns, so you will see some of them along the presentation. And one big implication of interactions is that they can create new information in systems that we don't have beforehand. So in school, they teach us that if we have initial and boundary conditions and the laws that govern a system, then we'll be able to predict, as in Laplace's demon, the future of systems. But what complexity brings is that there will be new information that gives us, a technical term is computational irreducibility, meaning that unless we observe it, we won't be able what the future will bring. There's no shortcut to the future. And this has many philosophical implications, but I just want to focus here on what happens when we have few interactions. So we have a systems with different elements, different properties, and usually these systems tend to be stable or robust because a change in one element does not affect many other elements, maybe one or two, but let's say when something happens to one of these elements, then that doesn't propagate. So we have robustness, we have stability, and this usually gives us order patterns. So these are predictable, and the advantage is that, let's say, we know what will happen. The disadvantage is that adaptation may be limited. And here, let's assume we have the same elements, but suddenly we have many more interactions. And here, the behavior changes drastically because we start having positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. So any change in one of these elements very probably will propagate through the whole system. So this gives us chaos, and this limits predictability in different ways, which have been studied thoroughly. And also, this gives us fragility because a small change propagates through the system, so we cannot really predict. And it's something that in many cases is seen as undesirable, even when in many cases it can have its advantages. And somewhere in between, we could call this balanced interactions. So we have not too many, not too few interactions. And this can give us the benefit of both extremes. So we can have at the same time certain robustness and certain adaptability. And we can say that this is what characterizes complexity. And it has relationships with fractals, which I will not delve into much because of time. But this is what we're interested, and also because complexity is prevalent in nature. And how come we have so many complex patterns in nature? And it's precisely because balanced number of interactions is what is most sustainable, independently on how we call our definition of sustainability, our definition of complexity. To speak about balance is a tautology, because it's only after we observe a system that survives, that we say, oh, if it had less interactions, then it wouldn't adapt. If it had more interactions, then it would be unstable. And then it has the right number of balance. So it's a bit like in the so-called Goldilocks zone. And it's very interesting and necessary to study different mechanisms can lead to this balance and also take systems out of balance and create new types of balances. So this is my only technical slide. These are different probability distributions for different scales. So again, these represent order complex and chaotic regimes characterized by few interactions, balanced interactions, and many interactions. So when we have few interactions in a system, now you can look this as histograms, or let's say, what's the frequency of different elements to have some value and at a particular scale. So for example, in the first one on the left, this could be the height or weight of different people in a population. Most people will be around the mean, and we have few people with short height, a few people very tall, and most of them are somewhere around the mean. And this is because if someone changes their height, that doesn't affect the height of other people. So there are few interactions for that variable. So variations in one element do not propagate through the system, and then this gives us these normal-like or Gaussian-like distributions. And actually, the good thing is that we can use calculus. If we have different distribution, like scale-free distribution or scale-free-like distribution, we can calculate the mean, but this is meaningless because we have few elements with big values and many elements with small values, like in earthquakes, like in solar flares, like in patterns of human communication, like in market crashes. And calculus is not appropriate for this type of distributions. So when we have this balanced type of interactions, when we have complexity, we need new tools. And for the chaotic, we have, this would be like white noise. So we have the same probability to be at any scale. So things are all over the place. And here, again, we can use statistics, because in the first case, we can use the mean and then ignore the outliers. In the chaotic case, we can use statistical mechanics and then just take the average of the whole system, like we do with gases, and in thermodynamics, people work with that in thermodynamics close to equilibrium. But with complexity, details matter, and then we need much more information and much more powerful tools to describe them. So it's not a coincidence that the scientific study of complexity began at the same time as the popularization of personal computers. And one of the properties of complex systems is emergence, that has been confused in many ways, because again, there are many different notions about it, but very generally we can say that it's information that is not present at one scale, but present at another scale. And for some, this can sound a bit mystic, because it's like, oh, where is this information coming from? But for example, we can have atoms of carbon, and we can know everything about those atoms, but depending on how they're organized, we will have graphite or nanotubes or buckyballs or diamonds. And these materials have very different macroscopic properties, but they're composed of the same elements. We can see the same in sports, in team sports. We can have the same players, but depending on how they interact, we will have very different team performance. So we have different types of emergence: weak, strong, synchronic, diachronic, upwards, downwards. The ones in red are the ones that can seem problematic for some, depending on the worldview of the observer, because there's this question on, okay, how subjective is emergence? And here in this illustration, the same types of emergence, just to explain them, synchronic is emergence in space, diachronic emergence in time. Weak emergence is just when new information arises, but without causal feedback. Strong emergence is when there's, from the emergent property, a causal feedback to the original level of description that created that emergent property. And we can also have upwards emergence, transversal emergence, downwards emergence. So it's just one property of complex systems, but precisely there's this uncertainty generated by interactions, which for some might seem problematic, because of course, if we are dealing with systems and we try to predict their behavior to avoid undesirable situations, we want to be on the order phase. But if we are too much in the order phase, then we won't be able to adapt, we won't be able to innovate, we won't be able to be creative. So actually, uncertainty can be seen as a benefit. Actually, if we didn't have this uncertainty, evolution wouldn't be possible. So actually, we can say that uncertainty gives us freedom, because the moment that things are not predictable, that they're not determined, it means that there's possibility of doing things differently. So I think that this is a hopeful message, but of course, we need to do the work. And just to quote Alan Turing, considered one of the fathers of computers, he said in the late 40s about intelligent machines, before AI was even coined, that if you want a machine to be infallible, then it cannot be intelligent. And he was referring to the fact that we usually learn by making mistakes. And if we want machines to be without mistakes, as we do, then their intelligence will be limited. So actually, we are the ones that need to make the mistakes, because then we'll be able to learn from them. And then, of course, we can use machines as tools. But then this gives us, again, the possibility of exploring new possibilities. So just to summarize, interactions are everywhere. We cannot ignore them. The more interactions we have, the more change we will observe. We have several tools to describe this type of change, but we need more tools. I mean, we cannot say that we have the final tools, because there are many things we are still limited about. We are understanding that there's this balance between too few and too many interactions, and different mechanisms that can trigger that balance. And then we can see uncertainty not so much as a problem, but as opportunities. So just want to invite you to the Conference on Complex Systems that my colleagues are organizing in Binghamton this October. You can also participate remotely. The call for abstract is still open, so please feel free to send your work and participate. And also, if you're interested to subscribe to Complexity Digest, you can do so. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I think you win the prize for the prettiest slides. So thank you. I'll tell you a story about before I introduce the next speaker, which riffs on the theme of interactions, because our next speaker, Leonardo Zoya, reminded me just a few minutes ago that we hadn't actually met for 15 years. And apparently, when I met him, I lent him a book, and he has kindly returned it to me today. So thank you, and that's a kind of example of an interesting interaction, I think. Well, anyway, Leonardo is an Argentinian researcher at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council, and also a member of the University of Buenos Aires. His work focuses on the theory and governance of complex problems, integrating computational modeling, participatory methods, and the philosophy of complexity. He's going to be talking on Can Statistics Think? Complexity, Future and freedom in the age of large language models. So, over to you, Leonardo.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel, for your presentation. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much, the organizers, for inviting me. Salam, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in your country. Thank you very much of your hospitality and of receiving us in your country and your magnificent culture that I'm discovering, including the Darisha. I'm honored also to share this panel with Carlos and Helena. My colleagues have spoken about the dynamics of complexity, and I would like to build on their insights on addressing a fundamental questions about, can statistics think? And this question introduces more than just the title of my presentation. It introduces a provocation. This is not a technical inquiry about artificial intelligence, but an epistemological and political problem about how knowledge changes when statistics become the medium through which we think, when statistics becomes the infrastructure of our society. How would you change here? The cognitive infrastructure of our society, that is the way, a way of organizing how we see, how we decide, and how we understand the world. The emergence of large language models inaugurates a new historical era. The way human and artificial thought is being coupled today represents a profound shift in our subjectivity. We are witnessing a metamorphosis of our civilizational ethos, a profound change in the way humanity relates to the world, to itself, and to the very nature of knowledge. I want to focus on three profound processes that are being reorganized by language model: thought, future, and freedom. If the cognitive infrastructure is changing, we must face an immediate challenge regarding our own autonomy. So, how can we think without being thought by the machine? We must recognize that human thought and large language models operate under fundamentally different rationalities. They don't just think differently, they obey different laws. On the one hand, statistical rationality seeks frequency, not truth. Its goal is to minimize error and optimize the next token based on past traces. On the other hand, human rationality is a way of a complex thinking. It's fueled by sense and meaning. It thrives in ambiguity and reflexivity, areas where probability finds no footing. But the crucial question here, the critical problem, is how these two rationalities are being coupled in our social practice. We face a radical choice between two main paths. On the one hand, a reductive or a simplifying coupling that I designated with UAI, that is, an unreflective, automatic, and instrumental. In this mode, we surrender our judgment to the machine's automations. On the other hand, we can conceive a form or a possibility of a complex coupling. I name RCC, that is reflective, critical, and creative. Here we maintain our stance as thinking subjects, using the machine not to replace judgment, but to expand the horizon of meaning. The future of human thought, and indeed the future of humanity itself, depend on the nature of this coupling, a relationship that defines who we are becoming. So this leads us a critical inquiry. What happens when the future is governed through a simplifying or a reductive coupling? And to understand this, we must recognize a fundamental structural mismatch. On one side, we have disorganized complexity, that is the realm of statistics, average, and error minimization, where operates large language models. On the other hand, we have organized complexity, where we found human problems such as life, suffering, inequality, violence, democracy, are complex problems. But the tragedy occurs when we treat organized human problems as if they were statistical ones. And here I want to make a point about the future, because large language models are engines of probable futures. They mirror the past to stabilize meaning, offering us a path of least resistance. But in doing so they conceal the latent futures, those singular, improbable possibilities that the model contains but refuses to show. Human existence, however, demands possible and desirable futures that are not predictable. They imply ethics and political choices. And here I think we have a strategic opportunity, an opportunity about our freedom and our emancipatory. In 1941, an Argentinian writer, Jorge Luis Borges, imagined the Library of Babel, an infinite universe of all possible books, a cosmos saturated with every combination of language. The tragedy of Babel is that by containing everything, it's offer nothing. In Babel, the problem is not a lack of information, it's the lack of a criterion to find our way through it. Decades later, Éric de Massier, a Moroccan artist whose etchings we see here, reinterpreted this library. He didn't just illustrate it, he thought it visually. In his version, the library is a perfect labyrinth with no exit. There is no librarian. There is no organizing principle. Humanity consumes itself searching for a catalog of catalogs, a kind of metabook that organizes the chaos, a source of meaning that never appears. Borges and de Massier imagined the very problem we face today. Borges dreamed this library, but we inhabit today in the age of large language models. But there is a crucial difference. In Borges' fiction, the tragedy is that there is no librarian. In our era, the tragedy is that there is one. Inside this model, there is a hidden librarian, a statistical librarian who organizes the world according to probability. The librarian decides what is visible and what disappears. And when the criterion is probability, the improbable vanishes. What disappears is not what is false. It is what is singular. The hidden librarian challenges the very core of human freedom. So we must ask, can we build a counter-librarian to make the improbable visible once again? This leads us to a disturbing question. What does human freedom mean when language, that is our primary mean of freedom, is co-produced by statistical systems? Thinking today is an hybrid act. The machine does not think, but it contains the very space where our thoughts are born. Against the silence of automation, I propose a technopraxis. This is not merely using AI, it's a reclamation of agency. It's a practice of freedom within the statistical machine. It begins with a human act. The capacity to introduce organized noise, a fertile uncertainty, into a system designed for redundancy. The goal is to force the model to navigate zones of low, coherent probability. We are not looking for random chaos, but for those rare, meaningful paths that the statistical average usually ignore. Therefore, we can say that technopraxis is a way of designing a kind of complex coupling, a recursive loop between human rationality and artificial rationality. This complex coupling is the gesture of the counter-librarian. The counter-librarian acts as a cartographer of latent futures to open futures, to deautomate language, to machine possibilities, and to stimulate creativity. Here you will see an example of technopraxis in action. It's a simple but subversive tool. I call it statistical perturbation prompt, and you can try it later, replacing the concept by a significant wall of your practice. We force the system to navigate its own blind spots. We rescue the singular from the wreckage of the average. But I think, and this leads us to the political dimension of this reflection, that if we fail to intervene, if we don't exercise this complex coupling through technopraxis, something deeper and more silent occurs. Statistics begins to occupy the place of human judgment. And when probability replaces judgment, it's not just thought that is transformed. Civilization itself is reconfigured. So the question becomes, what kind of civilization do we produce if we fail to recover judgment? In 20th century, Chaplin's Modern Times gave us a hunting vision, the automation of human body. Today, in the age of large language model, we face a new frontier of the same process. What is being automated now is no longer the body. It is our criterion. We are delegating to the machine the power to define what is reasonable, what is relevant, what is visible. The danger we face is not artificial intelligence as a technological entity. The danger is the substitution of judgment for correlation. It is the temptation to transform the model's probability into the reasonable criterion for deciding our most important public problems. This is what I call the statistical capture of judgment. It's the silence process through which probabilistic criteria replace human deliberation. It's not just an automation of tasks, it's the outsourcing of our capacity to decide. And this capture triggers a double systemic risk. First, a risk in our governance, where we attempt to manage organized complexity with disorganized statistical tools, leading to a mere administration of the past. And the second risk is in the plan of our civilization. When probability replaces judgment, we lose our public imagination. We begin to plan, evaluate, and exist within the cultural average of digital traces of a humanity in crisis. If we only follow the most probable path, we abandon our ability to choose desirable ones. So finally, the question is not whether statistics can think, the question is whether we can continue to think freely when statistical rationality becomes government rationality. The answer is not technical, it's not moral, it's not technological, it's epistemological and political one. And this is a humble and responsible call to our collective action. It is an invitation to reclaim the space where meaning is born. Because in the end, freedom is not about choosing between given options, it's creating options that there was no there. And that is something that only a human can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that challenge. Now going to open this up to discussion, and I'm going to start by asking the panel a question, but I'm hoping that you're going to follow up with your questions too. I'm going to ask each member of the panel, or all the members of the panel, I should say. You've all in various ways emphasized that knowledge is dynamic, uncertain, and the product of reflexivity. Why then do most philosophers and most people consider knowledge to be actually static, certain, and objective? Who would like to respond to that question?
I would say that this position Nigel stated us, this is a former rationality. This is not modern rationality. When we consider knowledge as static, I disagree to this point. This is not the modern view. The modern view is that the reality is in the process of permanent evolvement. And by the way, some philosophers from the past, for example, from classical German philosophy, Schelling, in his philosophy of nature, Naturphilosophie, his views about the nature and the connections in nature, feedbacks, positive, what we name now positive and negative feedbacks, which brings the systems to equilibrium, and positive feedback, which is responsible for fast growth, for example, avalanche-like growth investigated by the Russian school in the science of complexity is very important. Self-organization in nature, in different levels of nature, animate nature, living nature, human nature, and even super intelligence, noosphere. All levels of organization of the universe can be captured because systems are everywhere. Systems are everywhere. Bertalanffy said that. Everywhere, general systems theory. This is my view. So it's used to be said that we want to get objective knowledge and eliminate any subjectivity. But it's impossible in the modern world. Carlos said that uncertainty is freedom. Leonardo said that it's the difference between the artificial intelligence and human intelligence complexity. And this is exactly the creativity of the human mind, which is connected also the emotional intelligence and narration, our personal stories, which are involved in the scientific knowledge at the moment, because it's very difficult to comprehend complexity.
Yeah, I will give two simple answers, not so much about current philosophy, but most people, as you say, look things more statically. One of them is because it's easier. So let's say the way our brains work seems to prefer to describe, let's say, a snapshot, and then, let's say, after many snapshots, then we describe change. And some would argue that that has its roots in language itself. So most Indo-European languages have a structure where the focus is on nouns, and then verbs kind of do things to nouns. So, but let's say objects come first and actions come second. But that's not something arbitrary. or better said, it is arbitrary. Other languages like Tibetan, they focus more on the action first, and then objects kind of do things to, or you do things to those objects, but then the action comes first. So, of course, in a language where you start with change to describe your world, then it's better to accept change. But from the cradle, we are formed, our brains are formed to first look at what's static.
Okay, I'm going to add a bullet about this. I think that we can understand modernity as a simplification paradigm, and that paradigm is rooted in the very mental models of scientists, politicians, and also in the everyday life. And that paradigm search simplification, search order, search reduce uncertainty to control. And this style of thinking was developed both in the epistemological realm of science and in the political zone of our social practice. So it's difficult to move from there because it's very rooted in our way of being, in our mental models, and in the cognitive culture of our society. At the end, reduce certainty is a way to control and to intervene in the world.